Good morning, everyone. Rex Murphy is asking, should we be calling him Deputy Prime Minister Singh? There is a question to be asked. Is the NDP formally aligned with the Trudeau Liberals, or is there merely an unsigned pact? Just to be clear, the deal the government made with the Wee's Kielburger brothers was and is a mess. Everyone realizes this, and everyone includes the government itself. For that is why the Liberals took the extraordinary step of proroguing Parliament. It was not to do a reset, as they previously claimed. It was to terminate the various inquiries into their various ties with We, and how it came to be that nearly $1 billion of public money was, for a while, entirely under the administration of a troubled charity. I scroll down. There was and is much to look into. So now that there is a parliament, broken-backed as it is, and the Conservatives rightly wish to pick up where they left off, looking into this coziest of deals, what does NDP leader Jagmeet Singh and his 24-member caucus do? Why, they stand, or perhaps kneel is the better verb, with the Liberals in shutting down those efforts, and then offer embarrassing explanations, exotic procedural points to disguise their capitulation. In an interview, NDP House Leader Peter Julian described the Conservative motion calling for a probe of the We affair a dog's breakfast. Well, to that I'd say that Mr. Julian is far more familiar with a canine's first meal of the day than the rest of us, though what a dog's diet, breakfast or supper, has to do with a dubious billion-dollar contract with Craig and Mark Kielburger is a question better left to veterinarians and members of Parliament. There is a question to be asked, is the NDP formally aligned with the Trudeau Liberals, or is there merely an unsigned agreement, a tacit understanding, which, by not being formalized, not on record to be viewed and understood by the public, permits both parties to conduct a charade of their independence from one another? And we saw that charade yesterday in a couple of NDP tweets that I sent out, who very arrogantly were thinking they were better than conservative people. Anybody who, they were using conservative almost as a dirty word. And I think that's telling about the people who are doing that, right? Back to the article. On full consideration of all the accommodations we have witnessed since the Liberals went to minority and their untroubled cohabitation with Mr. Singh and the NDP from election night to the present day, the logical and reasonable conclusion is that there is an agreement that they have worked out a pact which Canadians are barred from knowing. I scroll down a little bit. We have been led to believe that Chrystia Freeland is the Deputy Prime Minister of Canada, that indeed may be the case technically, but if the guarantor of the minority Liberals' hold on power lies with the elegantly suited Jagmeet Singh, then perhaps the better understanding is that it is he, not she, who is de facto holder of that eminent title. Shutting down the We investigation also sends a signal that the historic expenditure the government is making will not get the detailed scrutiny they cry out for. Ignore the fresh news that the NDP is seeking to, quote, create a special parliamentary committee that will look into all federal government spending during the COVID pandemic. That's a bald case of Wednesday's spin masters trying to put a blanket on Tuesday's ruse. I think that's true. Well said. Well said. I scroll down. It is absolutely inexplicable that while the current government has blasted to nearly $400 billion in deficit spending, $400 billion, it has resolutely denied the Auditor General of Canada both the extra funds and extra staff needed for just an attempt to keep track of this tsunami of expenditures. Surely, it was in Singh's authority and competence to provide the public's parliamentary endowed watchdog with the means to do the work of that high office. Did he? Of course he didn't. Might have put some strains on the silent Concordat. But then again, you can't have an unofficial deputy prime minister bringing unwelcome burdens to the office of the prime minister. Yes, our prime minister does not like unwelcome burdens. Here is John Brassard. Sorry, I forgot that wrong. Trust me to get every name wrong. And here's what he says to the NDP. A naked plea to the NDP to not be taken for fools. And, well, I don't think they're gonna listen. He says a Faustian pact was made today, and I don't disagree with him. And sorry for the sound volume yesterday. I hope I fixed it today. Sometimes my program reduces the sound for some reason. I don't know if I'm too close or too far from my mic. I'm not sure, whatever. But anyway, I hope that the sound is okay. Apologies if it wasn't, or isn't.
And the last thing I'd say about this, Mr. Speaker, is that John Ivison earlier tonight wrote an article, and I'll quote from the article. He said, "The Liberals have signed a Faustian pact with the NDP that they seem intent on honouring until they have a large enough lead in the polls, at which point the New Democrats will be cut loose and patronised as being erratic and unreliable." And I'll say this to my colleagues in the NDP. They are going to wrap you around your finger, they're going to chew you up, and then they'll eventually spit you out. Because they know right now, Dan, that they need you because they can't win a majority government. But when they get to that point, unfortunately, you'll be irrelevant, and to them. So this is what they do. And this, Mr. Speaker, is all about power for them. And it shows very little respect, in fact, lack of respect for this place that it so richly deserves. Thank you.
And so that is a concerning plea to the NDP, but it will go unheard. Nothing's going to change. National Post. Here's some stuff, and we're going to get back to the spending stuff because I think that that's important, but there's some other stuff to talk about first. So we'll get to this, and then we'll get to the spending stuff. National Post is reporting alleged mastermind of lavish mansion casino raided by police met twice with Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. We met at least twice in 2016 with Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, including at a controversial Liberal fundraiser in the home of another wealthy entrepreneur. We was also among a delegation of 4 representing a Chinese government-endorsed industry group that met separately with Trudeau. Another member of the delegation donated $1 million to the Trudeau Foundation and the erection of a statue honoring the Prime Minister's father. Right? And so, questions arise. Another Conservative here. Trudeau dodges questions on meeting with alleged illegal casino operator, Michael Barrett. And he goes through this, and well, here we go.
Senior Liberals like Joe Pescasolido and Raymond Chan and individuals charged in a gangland shooting with the Chinese Communist Party. Now we've learned that the architect of a heavily armed illegal casino operation in Markham has twice had FaceTime with this Prime Minister, and surprise, he also has ties to the CCP. Canadians deserve to know, is the Prime Minister's proximity to the Chinese Communist Party elites in Canada affecting his ability to protect Canadian interests?
Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, we have always followed all the rules around fundraising and will continue to, but we actually went above and beyond that.
About those rules, I'll bring myself back here. About those rules, it's quite interesting, actually. Here's a Blacklock's, Spencer Fernando, Blacklock's. Liberals held election fundraiser in New York City, and it was funded by, there were lots of questions about rule breaking, etc. Questions that never got answered. These things got swept under the rug, not rugs. There's one rug. It's got a very, very big pile of dust under it, right? And everybody can see the rug and point at the rug and say, we should probably stop using that to sweep things under. And nobody cares. The NDP says the rug doesn't exist. Everything's just fine. But Justin Trudeau says we follow the rules, but they don't follow the rules. Like, this is the same as SNC Lavalin when Jody Wilson-Raybould, or when Justin Trudeau came out and said the story in the Globe and Mail yesterday was false. And basically calling Jody Wilson-Raybould a liar, and there was no pressure, never pressure. There was pressure. It's the same as all of the other times that he speaks and says, no, I never did anything wrong. I think he means I never meant to do anything wrong. Regardless. Maybe he doesn't. Maybe he doesn't even mean that. Maybe he doesn't mean that he never meant to do anything wrong. Maybe he means I didn't mean for you to know about this thing that I did wrong. Maybe that's what he means. Here's Pierre Poilievre. And so, are this CCP $1 million donation statue of your father, are these things meant to influence our Prime Minister? Is the Prime Minister an independent thinker? Why are we allowing people to put up statues in homage to our Prime Minister's father, who's also a Prime Minister, and then giving them influence or giving them FaceTime, right? Like, does it just cost $1 million and a statue of Pierre Elliott Trudeau to get your way with Justin Trudeau? Because, I mean, that seems like a pretty cheap price for the CCP, doesn't it? Like, that seems like, oh yeah, buy Canada. And then what else will you get on the way home from the store? Like, very cheap price. So just a statue? That's it? That's all he wants? Sure. In Canada? It doesn't even have to be anywhere else? Yeah, fine, sure, whatever. I mean, we've got parks named after the founder of Pakistan in Winnipeg. Right? Like, and Jinnah's not a nice guy. Jinnah started a bombing campaign to create Pakistan and then promptly died. I did a whole 2-video series on it. But it's incredible how much influence this Mr. Barrett asks a very pertinent question and doesn't get any response. And the response he does get is full of lies. Lies. We follow the rules, sure, except when they're inconvenient to you, and then you bury it. Right? Here is Pierre Poilievre, and this is funny. This is well done. The unfortunate part is nothing's going to get done. We don't have the numbers. Jagmeet Singh is aligned with Trudeau, giving them an effective majority. And what does he have to do? Like we is a bad scandal. Just by itself, it's a bad scandal. With all of the other stuff, they don't have the moral authority to govern, the Liberals. But the fourth party that lost half their seats is propping them up. So what are you going to do, right? Like we being anybody who's opposing this, and I don't know that the Conservatives really oppose what's going on, right? Like they voted for it. They voted in favor of it unanimously, right? Yes, we support Canadians, right? So at this point, we have people who are just willing to continue spending, but they put on a good show talking about the spending that the Liberals are doing and saying it's inappropriate. Here's Pierre Poilievre doing exactly that. Here we go.
Who would bet their own money on gateway casinos? Well, it turns out nobody. Of course, the company was just downgraded to junk status, and its parent company lost 95% of its value on the stock market before being delisted altogether. In fact, financial experts in Toronto say the company vastly overvalues its assets. But there's someone who would invest other people's money in it. The casino just got the jackpot of $200 million from this government. Wow. With the financial genius over there who invested $200 million of our tax dollars in this failing casino firm, please stand up.
The Right Honourable Prime Minister. While the Conservatives play silly political...
And he doesn't answer the question. And actually, this video is quite good because it fast forwards through Trudeau's statement. Watch. I can't do that. I don't know how to do that. Good job. Anyway, at the end, the answer is BS, right? The answer is BS. But it was quite fun to watch Mr. Poilievre try to hold Trudeau accountable. Holding Trudeau accountable isn't asking him uncomfortable questions in the House chamber. It's collecting votes to bring down the government and go to an election. That's what holding Trudeau accountable means. Holding Trudeau accountable doesn't mean creating a parliamentary session to talk about the overspending in COVID times. And we're going to look at that just right now in the next tab. It doesn't, right? Holding people accountable says, you made these mistakes, and the consequence is you don't have the moral authority to govern. You have to go back to the population and ask them for the moral authority to govern while carrying these errors, right? Blackface and the spending and the wee errors, the wee missteps, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And maybe the population will keep Trudeau in power. I mean, I certainly was surprised at the minority status in the last, the result of the last election. Not necessarily surprised. Having a majority government go from a majority to fourth or third is, or even opposition happens. But typically, if the government is majority, getting them out takes longer than one. And so, like the next time, right? Probably O'Toole will win. Just to, if you're looking at history, TikTok. Sorry, I'm diatribing. Let's get into the spending. Global News is reporting Trudeau government nears a record for leaving Parliament without a budget. A week this Friday, the 43rd Parliament will have existed for 316 days with no budget. The previous record holder was the Liberal government of Jean Chrétien, which took 315 days between the first sitting of the 37th Parliament on January 29th, 2001, and its first budget tabled December 10th, 2001. Current Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland was asked just after the speech from the throne to provide her thinking about the value of a federal budget and whether she was committed to tabling a budget before the fiscal year ends on March 31st. She curtly dismissed the question. Quote, the throne speech was clear that in the fall we will be presenting a fiscal update, Freeland said, apparently oblivious to the fact that one cannot update something, the 2020-2021 budget, that does not exist. At least her predecessor, Bill Morneau, when asked the same question, tried to excuse his way out of a budget by claiming that forecasting in such a pandemic would be too difficult. Freeland has not even offered that. And even if she did, that cannot be an excuse, said the former parliamentary budget officer Kevin Page. Budgets are fiscal plans, and to say that, quote, because there's too much of uncertainty we're going to manage without a plan is kind of bizarre, Page said. The reason we have plans is because there's uncertainty. Well, we don't know how much money we're going to spend in the next year. How could we possibly know? Yeah. Maybe look at all the factors, say, this is what we expect based on knowledge, and this is what we expect to spend. Cool. That's kind of how things work. Like, that's really how the government works. Really. But here, not how things work currently. Here's Pierre Poilievre again. He says, one of these things doesn't look like the others. The Bank of Canada is the 2020 World Heavyweight Champion on money printing. Money printing? So we've got Bank of Canada Bank of Australia is purple, Federal Reserve is green, Bank of Japan is yellow, Swiss National Bank is like a brownie yellow, and European Central Bank is blue. And wow, the Bank of Canada is red, is 456%. Everyone else is like under 150%, certainly. There's no 100% marker on the chart, so I can't tell you if it's under 100% for sure. But at least the chart has X and Y axis defined, right? Yay, that's a benefit. Here's Spencer Fernando talking about the same thing. It says the Bank of Canada is printing money like crazy. It appears that money printing in Canada is almost off the charts. A chart based on Bloomberg data compiled by Crest Capital LLC shows the Bank of Canada's balance sheet assets to nominal GDP assets. Okay. Sheet assets to nominal GDP year-over-year growth is at a stunning 456%. Meanwhile, in the US, Australia, Japan, Switzerland, and the European Central Bank, that growth is at 100% or less. Clearly, something big is going on here in Canada. This is deeply concerning, especially when we consider that the Canadian government spent about 50% more on average on pandemic response programs, yet Canada has the highest unemployment in the G7. The Liberals are shoving money out the door at a rapid pace, and this, combined with serious decline in investment that was taking place before the crisis, has led to the Bank of Canada printing immense amounts of money. There it is. And here's more reactions. Meanwhile, the Bank of Canada is taking monetary stimulus to a whole new level recently. Everyone stop freaking out. It's fine. Right? It's fine. It's not fine. It's not fine. This is something that many have been concerned about for some time. The Bank of Canada will try to keep Canada's economy stable, which becomes more and more difficult as the Liberals increase spending, restricting growth, and push investment out of the country. Canada also has the problem of being a nation that increasingly doesn't build anything real, with more and more of our economy amount to shifting money around on computers. Also, our absurdly inflated housing market, inflated in large part by foreign elites buying up our country, is a huge source of vulnerability. As a result, the Bank of Canada seems to believe it has few options other than printing more and more money, which of course brings its own problems with the risk of inflation, a loss of trust in Canada's currency, and serious economic decline. Canada's economy is a house of cards, and that is increasingly being exposed. Yeah. And here's how they're going to pay for it, because, you've got to have some way to pay for it. And when the creditors come knocking and say, yeah, how are you going to pay for this? This is how they're going to pay for it. And Toronto Sun is reporting inheritance tax can address some income inequality. Oh, didn't you know that owning a house makes you one of the elite people that the communists hate, right? So now they're looking to find how to redistribute that wealth, right? And basically, this is inheritance tax, right? So if somebody dies and you inherit something, then that will be subject to tax, even though presumably the person who made that money in the first place paid taxes on it, right? Also, they're talking about, or there's been balloons floated about taxing the equity or taxing the profit made on houses. And here's another tax. Yet another Trudeau fuel tax will mean 22 cents per liter carbon tax at the pumps. This has been bandied around the last couple of days. The gas price wizard did an article on it, and there's been a lot of people talking about this. I don't think that it's appropriate to layer on all of these taxes, but taxes are tricky in that if you get the public's consent, you can do it. And the public, if you look at the polls or whatever, there's a lot of people who are green liberals, right? And people who believe that taxing people to pay for the climate change initiatives, regardless of how poorly they work, they think that that's a good use of money. And so you've got the public's consent to tax them for this thing. They've figured out that if you can tax the public for this thing and they're fine with it, and then you just don't give a budget to anybody, you just spend the money on whatever you want, well, Yahtzee, right? You win. Or you can maintain a governing body until it all collapses under the weight of itself, right? And maybe that's what we're heading to. And maybe, I don't know if that's what they want, but I don't know. It doesn't look like they're trying to avert it, right? Like, and that's problematic. That's difficult. It's difficult to sit here and be like, yeah, it looks like nobody cares. It looks like we're just going to keep spending. Yay. See that graph? We're going to double it. Yay. Here's something that just struck me as funny, right? I mean, like, again, not funny. This is CP24. International couples plan reunion in Canada under new travel restrictions, travel exemptions. I wonder if they'll get together for Thanksgiving. They can get together. These guys can get together, but don't you get together with your family. Don't you dare. Don't you get together with your family. These guys can get together and have turkey at like an airport, Swiss Chalet or something like that. Give us a festive special. Do they do festive specials for Thanksgiving? Not yet. Okay. Regardless, these guys can get together for Thanksgiving because they're in Canada. And Canada allows that. But apparently, reunions with regular families in Canada, not allowed. Regular families being people who would normally see each other during Thanksgiving, right? Man, just very frustrating with regards to how the rules are being applied, right? Do you feel like everyone is equal and everybody's rules apply the same? No, me either. Here's Randy Hiller, and he says, Ontario is still refusing to release the all-cause mortality data for March to June. They've told me it won't be ready until June 2021. Unlike every other jurisdiction, what are they hiding? And here is, this is the data that's the collateral damage, right? The heart attacks, the unscreened cancer, all of that. So what are those deaths, right? And why do we have up-to-date, like, hourly COVID case counts, hidden death counts, right? And we're not allowed to know what else other people died from, right? Like, man, the data and the manipulation is just off the charts. Anthony Fury says between March 15th and 2020, March 15th, 2020 and September 29th, 2020, breast cancer treatments were down 29%. Prostate cancer treatments dropped 25% compared to the same period the year earlier. Brian Lilly says figures released by the Ontario Ministry of Health show drop of more than 70% for some surgical procedures. Surgeries for children were down more than 60%, all due to COVID. This isn't good news. Like, it's not good news generally. Like, I don't think that we're having surgery, and, maybe I'm wrong. Tell me in the comments. I could be wrong. I don't think we're having surgery necessarily for fun, right? Like, I don't think you'd send your children into surgery for fun, but now they're down by 60%. So were we doing 60% surgeries unnecessarily, or are we missing some major things that should be being taken care of regardless of COVID? Would we stop the world for a flu? Why are we doing this for COVID? Why? It doesn't make rational sense. Here's an opinion piece that says 7 months into the pandemic, testing in Ontario is a fiasco. It is a fiasco. They're doing all sorts of, they can't get the daily tests. They can do 70,000 or 50,000, let's say, between 30 and 50,000. But they can't actually get those tests into a lab and results of that many tests. And the more days they do the 50,000 tests or 40,000 tests or whatever amount of tests that they do, the more of a backlog there is. And so the data is all skewed. And what use is a test if you have to wait 8 days to get the test and then 8 days to get the results? What use is it other than to pad the government numbers? I don't get it. It doesn't make any sense. It's a fiasco. It's a mess. And since when do you start testing the population and contact tracing if there's a bad flu around? You don't. You say to stay home and get well, right? This is happening all over the West. Here's BBC. New restrictions for parts of England likely next week. Are the numbers in line calling for this, right? Are there countless bodies stacking up in morgues? Are there ICUs close to the limit? No. Same as here. It's very concerning because the numbers, the real numbers, the numbers that would justify people being okay with shutting down the economy, because people were okay with shutting down the economy in March. When we didn't know what this was, when the videos coming out of China had people having random seizures and falling face first on the ground, and then Chinese officers coming and taking them away, that was purposely, I think, scary now in retrospect. And because it was scary, because people were so willing to lock down, here we are, right? Not very long later. And this is in direct, it starts with C, hold on. Contravention of our traditions, right? We're a free people. And if there's an illness, again, I don't think twice about sending my kids to school during flu season. I don't think that they're going to die, and despite the fact that COVID-19 kills many less children than flu kills, right? There was one death, as far as I've heard, under 19 in Canada, and they weren't in Ontario, as far as I know. So, I have a hard time believing that the numbers are calling for these restrictions everywhere in the West. I have a hard time for that. And watching Boris Johnson's rhetoric, it looks like all the other leaders, right? Like this, Doug Ford saying, over 3 million people have downloaded the COVID Alert app, but we can do better. Yeah, it's one of the easiest and most effective ways to help Ontario stop the spread, protect yourself and others. How does it stop the spread? How does it stop? It doesn't stop the spread. It doesn't stop the spread at all. Like, nobody, first of all, I'm learning languages using Duolingo, and I've got like over 1,000 days. It's pretty, whatever. I do it 15 minutes in the morning. It's not a big deal at all, except I can speak more French now than I could 1,000 days ago, which is great. But there are a lot of people who have apps that they've downloaded and never thought about again, right? And there are apps. So I used to use MyFitnessPal because I used to be bigger and I'm not so big anymore. So I don't use it anymore, but it sits on my phone and it doesn't do anything. I haven't even logged into it. And I don't think it's got any permissions or anything. It just sits on my phone. I think that's exactly what this app will do. And that's what they're hoping that it'll do, except when you give it permissions, it'll ping other people around. But how does that prevent spread? Because then you get a notification that says you've been potentially exposed, except that the tests give a 50% false positive, at least a 50% false positive, especially when you're talking about high PCR cycles. And I don't want to get too technical, but the PCR cycle threshold should be 24. Anything above 24 has much higher probability of false positives, and Ontario is doing it above 35 to 40, or I think maybe 45. So if you use this app and if you get a notification, there's no guarantee that it's an actual real case of COVID. It's just somebody's tested positive and they're contact tracing that test. And I just don't believe that that helps. And I think that this is a huge overreaction. You've got a bazooka to kill a fly. And, no. I do not comply. I do not agree with it. I don't comply. And they have zero credibility. No credibility left. No credibility. Nothing that they've said has been true. Nothing. Liars. Okay, Toronto Sun, moving on a little bit to provincial politics. Ford goes electric. Ontario poised to win. Apparently, Ford is going to be building an electric truck and an electric car, electric Mustang and an F-150. I think it's BS. I think the whole move to electric is going to fizzle out. Why? Because right now you can take 6 minutes and $30 to $50 and fill up 50 liters of fuel that will make your car travel 500 to 600 kilometers, make your truck travel or work for 8 hours a day, and take you to your work site, et cetera, and take you home. If you replace that with an electric truck, and the charging of this electric truck now takes 8 hours, and you're out of gas, or for some reason the charging didn't work, like that's unacceptable. That's not an acceptable trade-off for most working vehicles, right? Like there are certain places that an electric vehicle might work. Canada's not one of them. We're too cold most of the time. But regardless, this is all wrong-headed, and I don't think it's going to be. It doesn't work unless there's subsidy. Unless there's massive subsidies for people to buy those vehicles. You go, oh, the fuel efficiency of this is X, and fuel costs are about $1 a liter, and I've got to spend $10,000 more to get the battery, and the battery I still have to maintain and blah, blah, blah. No, man, the technology's not there yet. And Elon Musk maybe has a good product with the Tesla, but even then, there's flaws in it. Go look at the cold weather. Look at the forums in Tesla and look at the cold weather stuff. And when they talk about cold weather, they're talking about like 40 degrees Fahrenheit, right? We're colder than that in Canada, in places in Canada. So I'm skeptical, very skeptical, because I thought it was all true. I thought that they were telling us the truth. And then I looked into it. The more I looked into it, the more I was like, this is a horror show. These people are lying, and they know they're lying. National Post reporting again, BC NDP offers $1,000 to voters as part of re-election platform. We will pay you $1,000. Vote for us. I mean, let's just get down to brass tacks here. How much are you going to give me? Isn't this illegal? And also, isn't that kind of like if you go to a Banana Republic, the guy walks around with a big stack of money, right? And he's like, hey, you going to vote for me on whatever day? I've seen videos like this, and they're like they were made in the 80s of third world countries where that's happening. This is the same. It's the same thing, right? I'm going to make policies that give you $1,000 bill. Here you go. Seamus O'Regan had the government spend more than $213,000 defending Seamus O'Regan in small claims court. Your tax dollars at work. You're welcome, Seamus. You're welcome. Everything go okay? Yeah? Money well spent? Great. Could you send some money to the Auditor General? No? Okay. CBC's cutting 60 jobs over the next 3 months. Corporation cites higher costs, declining revenue. Job losses are in 5 locations across the country, but most are in Toronto. Roughly 50 jobs of the jobs are unionized. About 10 management positions are affected. Well, I mean, you should probably mothball the whole thing. Get rid of it. Buy CBC. I'm just sick of propaganda. Like it's a whole network of propaganda garbage. Like I'm so sick of paying for it. And it's not like it's well balanced. It's not like it's even based in reality. They've put on like the Desmond, I've seen Drag Kids and Desmond the Amazing or whatever his name is. These things aren't appropriate. It's not appropriate for a public broadcaster. Like, put on some kids shows, put on some educational shows. But man, like if you've been watching and paying attention, some of the new Disney shows, not appropriate for kids, the themes and things that are in there, some of the cartoon shows that are aimed at kids, you got to watch, man, because they look like they would be good, and then you watch and they're not good, right? So I like the CBC growing up. I like that we had something similar to the BBC and blah 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 blah. But this is just have you seen Men in Black? If you've seen Men in Black and the Edgar suit, right? CBC is wearing an Edgar suit of CBC of days of yore, right? Like it's no longer that. It's a terrible, awful, stinking pile of whatever the heck Edgar was under the Edgar suit, and it just needs to pull the drain, just empty it all out, right? Empty it all out. Bye bye. This is another example of liberals. This is the last story for this morning. Oh man, I keep getting longer. CTV News is reporting Canada banning plastic bags, straws, cutlery, and other single-use items by the end of 2021. In the era of COVID-19, banning plastic just seems like just yet another way to punish small business. Oh, you've got a restaurant, do you? All your cheap plastic utensils, get rid of them and bear the cost of replacing all of that with like approved bamboo or something like that. And there's, again, refer to my earlier diatribe about there are people who don't understand how business works, believe that small business should bear these costs because, they're so rich and all that. And they just have zero understanding. And that's a byproduct of our education system. That's a byproduct of a lot of people working for the government. That's a byproduct of a lot of people not understanding how sales works, both salespeople and people purchasing things, right? Like most people hate salespeople, but you have to understand what the job is, right? And most salespeople who do the job don't understand what the job is. You're supposed to help people, right? Like, hey, you've got this problem of needing a new computer and I've got the solution because I know a lot about computers. Tell me what you need your computer to do and I'll help you get the right computer for you, right? Like that's just an example, but there are so many salespeople who are so stuck in their own head that they can't even figure out that you're supposed to ask the customer what they want, right? Anyway, big aside, but it's expectations, right? Like the Canadian public expects these small business owners to just fall in line with all of these government regulations. Have you been paying attention to how often and how insane the government regulations for the COVID-19 are? Imagine being a small business trying to navigate that and then add this, right? Toss it in, forget about it. I'll run a website instead. But even that, right? Like, oh man, Gellibo's after us, right? The website stuff, it's the same thing. Why would, like, here's what I do with my websites. I have, you know what? I won't tell you because if I tell you, then somebody will use that and close, not that loophole, but you have to be smart. You have to put your servers in places that prioritize free speech, right? Your ownership needs to be not personal, right? And so, right? Be smart about things. But it's unfortunate because our government is not smart about things. And the tools they use to crack down on bad behavior are bazookas to kill houseflies. It's not appropriate. It's not appreciated. And man, I wish that we'd have somebody to hold those liberals accountable. And not by starting a parliamentary session where you're just going to sweep it all under that invisible rug that Jagmeet doesn't want you to see, right? All right, that's enough out of me for today, everyone. Thanks for watching. Check out CanadaPoly.com, check out CanadaReport.co, check out SpeakingMoistly.co, and have a wonderful, wonderful day. I think that went pretty well.